us off when it seemed, when we thought the COVID was going down. And then when Delta started, we're all masked again, but we are ringing. My funny story was many, many years ago when one of the choir director's daughter was getting married and she wanted the bells. And so I was invited to the wedding. So I was in heels and the fancy dress and all that. And we were ringing and we rang and we rang and we rang and we rang, and we'd stop and we'd look and the bride was still outside waiting, and we'd ring some more and we'd ring some more, and we were waiting for her to leave. We'd go out and check and see if she'd left. No, she hadn't left. Finally, we stopped ringing completely and went out there, and she said, "We were waiting until you finished ringing."
Oh, no.
How polite of them.
Yes, we would have been still there ringing.
That's a good one.
I should just say, anyone, please feel free to chime in at any time with either encouragement or prodding. This is a very much an open stage, and go ahead and if something occurs to you and you'd like to jump in, just send me a little note, so I'll add you to the list. Kind of like a coffee house at your college's student union or something.
Can I say something?
Do it.
I have a similar story. I remember
right, weddings. Let's get all the wedding stories out.
Yeah, a bunch of us were up in Quebec, and we were asked to ring for a wedding, and a real fancy wedding at the cathedral up there. And so the bride pulls up in this uncovered wagon or something like that. I don't know what you call them. And they had pigeons waiting, and they were going to let the pigeons take off when the married couple came back out. And anyway, she sat there and she sat there and she sat there, and she refused to go into church. And at some point they had to let the pigeons go. I think this was like an hour after she arrived. She was still waiting. And the pigeons just, instead of, circling gracefully upward, they just took off, heading for home. And what turned out was the groom was stuck in traffic someplace in Quebec City and couldn't get there. So that was an amusing story.
Weddings with animals are a pretty risky proposition, really.
Imagine if he was late. The last thing on our mind was the pigeons.
Mhm.
Just please show up.
He's lucky the pigeons didn't shit first before they took off.
Yeah, for sure. I think they were more interested in getting home for food.
We have a photo of my Heather on the morning of our wedding, all done up. Sorry, I'm trying to grab the bells as I tell this. A photo of her all done up, staring very nervously at her father as she's on the phone, an old, an actual landline handset, because she's calling me, trying to find out where I am and if I'm going to make it, because I had been pulled over.
Oh no!
I was the only one with nothing to do that morning, so I was driving back and forth to the train station and picking people up, and I got pulled over at one point. And this is only the vaguest of tangential connections to ringing, because in fact, sorry, I need to get some scissors to free the bells. These the guys.
Yeah, they ring.
There we go. Those were attached to our wedding invitations. But that was before I knew that you all existed and that bells were a thing that could be rung by hand.
Yeah,
any other
little did
wedding
you
ones,
know.
or should we? Yeah, little did I know what I was going to get into with these latest of bells.
We have a wedding one.
You have a wedding one. Okay, the butlers have a wedding one. They can chime in.
Haha.
Oh, very good.
Sorry, that's not going to be the last time.
So we, as you know, many of you know, we take these tours to England, and we were ringing at some country little church. And after we ring for about 45 minutes, I guess. And then we came out, and there's this little crowd of little old ladies standing outside. And we all thought, oh, how nice. The village turned out to listen to these Americans ringing. And one of our group said, oh, did you like the ringing? And they said, not particularly, but we came to look for the bride.
Well, it would have been nice if you could have run for the wedding.
We have
Yeah,
run
we
for
have
weddings
rung
in
for
the
weddings.
past.
Yes, we have rung for weddings on our tours. That's always nice.
As close to that as the Marietta Tower has come is that, diagonally across from us, there's a Baptist church. And we've rung for several of their weddings. Because of course they can hear our bells.
Right.
So they've requested them a couple of times,
That's pretty cool.
which was kind of nice.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Anna, I hear you have a Stedman story.
And me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, it's a very short story. It's just that Eddie, my husband, was very fond of conducting Stedman. At one point, we were ringing the tower and he got rather agitated and said, 4, lead, lead. Oh, I am 4. That's my story.
Actually, that's pretty good.
It was a great moment that I could hold it over his head for many years.
Well, while we're on the subject, I should ask. I'm maybe there will be silence after this, but anyone else have any Ed stories?
What, Ed stories?
Ed Martin.
Ed Martin.
Well, I have a few, but
I
You
haven't.
have an unfair advantage.
when we were ringing handbells together at some kind of party and Tim was sitting on his lap and we were ringing a Stedman, and the middle 2-year-old Tim yells out, Bob. And Eddie yells out, no, Bob.
I have a Timmy Martin story.
Oh yeah, my
Yeah.
son.
I
Go for it.
remember we were ringing a quarter peal in Washington, and Timmy was 3.5, and you were in the quarter peal end, and I thought we were going to lose you any minute because Timmy was, first of all, he dragged the dustbin around for a while and made a big racket, and then he got going with the fire extinguisher, and that's when we really thought we were going to lose you. And then and finally he stopped, got bored with that, thank goodness, and he just started talking to himself for a while. So we managed to get through the quarter peal.
I'm amazed that we went for that quarter peal with Tim on the loose. I rang a quarter on hand with Cecily and Eddie, and Tim was on the loose for that in Cecily's apartment. We almost lost that because he decided to play with the answering machine, and we had to kind of stretch our legs to stop him walking, but we made it.
I'm impressed.
Who knew it was an aerobic activity?
Yeah, right.
As long as we're in the vein of ringers we've loved ringing with who aren't here with us this evening, Beverly, you said you got a David Mills story to share.
Oh boy, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the Butlers know about this. I don't think most of the rest of you have heard it. We used to always go up to Quebec City, which some of you still do. And at that time we had a ringer that had an airplane. Or well, he rented an airplane on a regular basis. I can't remember his last name. Downey. And I guess there were 4 of us. No, there were 5 of us in the tower from Brewster, and David came up from Philadelphia. Must have come to the airport near us. And so we all headed off. And about halfway through, we stopped in, I guess it was Vermont or New Hampshire, someplace up there to change fuel. And David came out and said, okay, now we have, 5 Americans and a Brit. And I said, no, you have 2 Brits and 4 Americans. And he said, oh, well, I can't change it now, thank God. We won't change it now because the Canadian people don't care that much. They'll care a lot when we come back into the US. So we'll change it then. Right? So we head off to Quebec City and David pulls out his passport and has a big corner cut off. I said, David, that sounds like an expired passport. And he looked at it and he said, yeah. And not only that, I don't have a green card with me.
Oh, no.
So we said, okay, we're going to go back to the original thing where we only have one Brit and the rest of her Americans. Well, like we said, there was no problem getting into Canada because they don't seem hard there. Probably do now. So we decided for the 3 days to try to teach David to speak American. Those of you that knew David, you know that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So when we finally headed back, so at this point, fortunately, Tom had never changed the record. So it was down still as only one Brit, which was Peter, who is still British, by the way. Never got an American passport. David later did finally get an American passport, but we decided that none of us will use passports except for Peter. The rest of us will use driving licenses, which back then in Canada you could still do. But when we finally landed in Vermont or New Hampshire, or wherever it was we stopped, David and I were wearing shorts, so we were really cold, and we both ran off to the men's room and the ladies' room, so we wouldn't be there talking. So the rest of them talked frantically with the local whoever does the check. And so when we came back, to show our driving licenses, basically the only thing David said through the whole thing was, "Yep, is this your driving license?" Yep. And we got him through. So we smuggled him back into the US. That's the story.
That's a good one. I remember hearing that a couple of times.
Yeah.
Dear people.
I kind of want to save the animal-based ones for later.
Uh-oh.
I don't know. I feel like that'd be a good way to end the evening. But any others that we got to chime in with? Any notable ringers that we want to expose the grand stories of here before we come back to?
If you want another wedding one, I can mention.
Oh yeah.
We rang for the wedding of famous opera singer Denise Graves at the cathedral in Washington. And the cathedral told us to ring at such and such a time. And at such and such a time, it appeared that the wedding was still going on. And then an hour later, the wedding seemed to still be going on. So then we rang, and then we left, and the wedding was still going on. The wedding of famous international opera star Denise Graves took about 3 hours at the cathedral. And somehow the cathedral didn't know this when they told us what time to
Good
ring.
Lord.
We rang during the wedding. You can't really hear the bells in the cathedral.
Yeah.
It was quite bizarre, but this was a big shindig. All kinds of famous people were there, I suppose. But the cathedral usually runs a pretty tight ship, so I'm not sure why they allowed them, the cathedral did allow this thing to run away from them.
Huh.
She met her groom.
But you got paid.
We did get paid. I'm sure
Halfway through the wedding, are you going to tell Denise Graves that she's got to quit or pick up the pace?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So
I don't know. I mean, I'm a Roman Catholic, and even I think that a 3-hour wedding might be a little too much.
Uh-huh.
How long did the royal wedding last?
Not that.
Not 3 hours.
There are a number of us that can tell David Mills stories. These ringing tours in England, we would all be in the one van. At the beginning, it was a 16-passenger van, and later on it was just a 9-passenger van and so on. But in an early tour, the van got to smelling worse and worse and worse. And it finally boiled to the surface that David had bought a snack of smoked mackerel and hadn't finished it. Uneaten, wrapped in its wrapper under his seat, and then sort of neglected it. Whether he forgot or not, I don't know. But this was discovered by the rest of us.
Yeah.
And it was a warm summer that year.
It's all about Ghana.
Wasn't the only time he forgot something. He bought shrimp once and did the same thing.
Oh,
my
yeah.
God.
All right. I like this call and response. So can we get another Butler tour story from a non-Butler? Is there any? And then maybe we can get Eileen and Bruce's commentary on the affair.
Sure, Teresa has a couple stories, and Beverly. And
Well, there was the
Mary
running
would be
issue
here
with
the the ceiling falling on her head, but I don't remember the detail.
There was the running issue of how Lynn's eggs were cooked, generally not sufficient to her requirements. She wanted them brown on the bottom and crispy on the edges, and the yolks very, very, very hard. And we had a lot of trouble convincing kitchen staff that that's really what she wanted. There would be times she'd send an egg back because it wasn't done enough, and they'd send out another one that wasn't done anymore.
Oh dear.
And, we tell them, cook it until it's like a hockey puck. Cook it until you can drop it on the floor and chip the tiles.
Except the Brits didn't know what a hockey puck was. And that's the problem. But that's exactly right, Teresa. She always wanted it so well done. We always used to say to her, why do you bother eating them if you keep sending, ordering them if they're never what you want? Why eat something else? But she wanted the protein.
She wanted the protein, but she doesn't like the
wanted
flavor of eggs.
Yeah, she didn't like eggs, but she always.
So she wanted eggs that tasted like nothing.
But then
Exactly.
the other opposite was Beverly, who always wanted her eggs very loose. Her scrambled eggs had to be exceptionally loose. So we had one extreme to the other extreme, and we always had issues at breakfast time.
Then you always had Bruce that wanted the bacon that was almost raw.
Right. Their bacon.
The one I remember now was the time that, I don't remember where we were, but they had all the cereal in those big glass bowls.
Oh,
yes. A cork thing at the top. And somebody had taken all the corks off so we could get it very easily. And Chris comes back to the table with what he thought was some kind of, I don't know what you thought it was.
Weetabix.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And he started trying to eat it, and he tried to actually cut through this piece of cork.
He poured milk on it. He put jam on it, and,
Oh, yeah.
and he tried to cut it, and it just wouldn't cut.
I never laughed so hard in my life. I almost peed myself.
I don't think any of us were.
Eat
Yeah.
the cork.
And of course, the owner was not very happy because,
Well, they
I
were
don't think
probably-
it was actually cut, but it certainly was covered with jam and all kinds of stuff.
Place in Scotland, logically enough, he thought it was an oatcake. He really
Right.
did.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, be fair.
And it looked just like one. It really did. But it was,
Yeah.
It was not obviously cork,
yeah. It was.
which is in Ireland, not Scotland.
I've got to
it's
go
like-
for a few minutes and come back because I'm doing something at 8 o'clock and I'm hoping to eat for a few minutes. So I will quickly tell an animal anecdote and then I got to go. That we were ringing a quarter with Marge Batchelor as she was then conducting it. And she couldn't understand why the rest of us were like laughing and looking at her and making strange faces. And we kept ringing, but it finally, we could tell her at the end that a mouse had jumped down her rope and and run sort of behind her. So it was somewhere in London, but I'm not sure, maybe St. Olives, I'm not sure.
Oh, gee.
So I'll be back soon. So please enjoy more animal anecdotes.
Yeah.
The only one I can think of is the bee in the tower that
That's it. You're talking about the bee peel?
We have another one on the tour, the very first tour we ever went
no,
on.
this one was in Philadelphia. It was a peel that Linda
Yeah.
was calling, and Bill Kolar was in it. And a
Right.
bee flew into the ringing room, landed on the rope, shot up through the ceiling, and came back down and flew around again. And I believe we lost it because we were so concerned over whether the bee was going to sting somebody, having been rather astonished at being zipped around in the tower, that we lost track of what we were supposed to be doing.
We call that bee peel or the bee non-peel.
The bee non-peel.
It's the non-bee team.
Did
the
you say
animal-
I was calling that?
Yeah, I think
Can't
so.
remember that one at all.
Yeah, Bill was on the 7th.
So the mouse, the bee, Bruce and Eileen, you were saying something from your first tour?
Yeah, we had Lynn Codridge on the first tour, and we went to a little village in Somerset called Pilton,
Oh,
and we went as usual. Either after a practice, it's got a bit dim in our memories right now, but anyway, we went up to the local pub, which required maybe half a mile, if that, walk. And when we left, it was perfectly daylight. And Lynn had one drink, and that was enough for Lynn, not because it was alcoholic necessarily, but that's all she had. And she wanted to go back to the lodgings. So we told her how to go. She set off. A few minutes later, Lynn comes walking back in the pub. We said, "Oh, did you get lost?" She said, No. I heard some rustling in the bushes and I thought it was a bear coming to get me. But of course, there's no bears in England anyway. So we told her there's no bears. Send her off again. She goes off. 10 or 15 minutes later, she's back again. She said, "What are you doing back here? We gave you the directions." She says, "Yeah, you said follow the wall." So I followed the wall. And it was a circular wall that came all the way. So by that time, we
were ready to all go back.
All go back. So she got escorted back.
Yes.
Forgotten the wall.
Yes, so did I, but now I remember it when Bruce just said it. Yes.
How is Lynn doing? Do you stay in touch?
No, we haven't heard from her, but I see she's on the list.
She's
so
joining tomorrow at some point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when we had our June birthday party for St. Martin's and St. Mark's, she did contact me and said unfortunately, she wasn't able to come because she wasn't vaccinated. And but didn't give any details on why. I don't know if it was a medical reason why she wasn't, or she just didn't believe in being vaccinated. I don't know. And I didn't, inquire any further.
So Tom, a few moments ago, we were talking about cuisine, and something was mentioned as, or was referenced as being Scottish. And you threw into the chat that you had a air quotes surrounded Scottish tour anecdote to share. Care to explain what you were hinting at there?
Sure. Yeah. So it starts with Andrew Farmer, who was in the States for several years in the 80s, and he was he did a postdoc in Wisconsin, in Madison, which is about 3 hours from Chicago, and he came down to Chicago every weekend for practice and stayed around to ring handbells. He learned to ring in Scotland. He went to St. Andrews for his PhD, and he noticed in the Chicago area there were several suburbs that had Scottish names that he had seen in Scotland. And he got the idea that we ought to do a Scottish tour around the suburbs of Chicago. So he came up with 6 places. Mark Rizzo and Andrew and I set a date and all set, and we had our practice, our usual Saturday practice, finished at 1 o'clock, and we started our Scottish tour. So we're going to go to six places, ring a quarter peal in each place, and report on that. Let's see. So we practice finished at 1. We got some food at some point right after that. Mark had to go to his apartment to pick up some stuff. So it kind of, we didn't get as quick a start as we would have liked. But we made our way up to Glencoe, which is the first place we rang. And it's right on Lake Michigan. And we thought that'd be great to ring a quarter peal along the lake, which turned out to be a bad idea because the waves got in the way of us hearing the bells. But we, after a false start or two, we got our quarter there. Moved on to the next place, Loch Lomond, I think, and then rang a quarter there, went to Mundelein, rang a quarter there, and Inverness, and everything's going, it takes a while to ring a quarter, and it takes a while to find a place where you can do it, but things were moving along, but we got our late start, and it was getting dark. And so we got to the 5th place. And I should have mentioned this was in the summer. It was a hot, sweaty summer. And we got to the 5th place, and we looked around and said, we're not going to spend much time looking around for a place. So we just saw like a parking lot at a strip mall, and we just went, that'll be fine. We'll ring it in the car and no worries. So we rolled up the windows and keep the bugs out and stuff. And there we were in this parking lot. So let's ring a quick quarter, and we got about halfway through, and this bright light came straight coming in the windows, and we had to stop, and it was the police, of course. Here they come. He walks up to the car, and realize, when you're ringing handbells, at least with me, you're concentrating, you're breathing deeply. It was a hot, humid night, and so the inside of the windows were covered with fog, and this policeman comes up and say, "What are you guys doing?" And so it's not clear how do you explain yourself out of that. But Mark Rizzo was in the driver's seat, and he just said what was going on. He looked at it and said, innocent as he could, but he said, "Would you believe we're ringing bells?" And the policeman bought it. He just left us alone. And then we stayed there and rang a quarter peal there, and he didn't come back to get us. So, and then we went and rang one more quarter in the last place, and nobody bothered us there. But and then we had a shot of scotch.
I'd love to hear what that police officer said to his comrades when he got back to the
I'm no
station.
kidding. Yeah.
You won't believe what I had tonight. Ringing bells.
Yeah, that's what they said. and they had bells in their hands, so they might have been telling the truth.
Takes all kinds of weirdos.
Interrupted or altered performances keep coming back. Alan, I think you've got something in that vein. Is that right?
I do. This was a long time ago in Texarkana. I couldn't even remember which year it was. And there is a place about 50 miles away from Texarkana, which is, Texarkana is mostly in the middle of nowhere, but we got deeper into the middle of nowhere by driving down to the junction of Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. The name of the town was, anybody want to guess?
Bellsville?
Louis Texarkana?
Lou Texark.
Louis Texark.
Lou Texark. It's a real town. It's a wide spot in the road, which is where we rang at the wide spot. And we rang a quarter peal, a major there in hand. It was quite late when we got there. It was definitely, the sun was setting. We had 3 camp chairs kind of things, and a citronella candle. And the band was David Graves, myself, Wilton Adams, and Burl. Burl was calling, of course. And we were there kind of settling in, and a car that we were, looked like we were on the property of a house, which was probably 100 feet away. And we were just right at the corner of a gravel lot in front of a closed gas station. And we could see like a blue light through the house curtain. So they had the TV on in there. And some car drove up and stopped right before we started. And one of the funniest thing that happened was that Wilton got up, handbells in hand, and they said, "What are you guys doing?" And Wilton started explaining what we were doing. But the funny thing was that the closer that Wilton, I need to turn my camera on because can't see my waving hands. The closer that Wilton moved to the car, the higher the window went. And when he'd back away again, the window would go back down some more. It was like there was, a string tied to Wilton's knees in this window, the top of this window, and a pulley down below. It was just so funny. They finally were satisfied, or just decided we were just crazy enough that we probably wouldn't cause any problems. And we did our quarter peal, and it was freaking dark by the time we got done. And then we drove most of an hour back to Texarkana. So that was definitely a interrupted challenge appeals. Actually, that wasn't the one I told you about, Matthew, but if you got time, I'll do another one later.
Yeah. No, I
Okay.
think, yes, I think we certainly would have time. It's funny, we haven't heard from Bruce and Eileen in a while, and I'm sure you've got plenty of interruptions, but if there's not one jumping to mind, I think Linda, you've got another story in mind.
Yeah,
wanna-
Ellen just reminded me of it. I remember Houston had an AGM a long time ago, and I think was Burl staying with you guys. Anyway,
Yep.
she got so flea bitten that
Alan
For the
knows.
future record, since
gave her
Tom is
you gave
recording
her
this,
flea
Alan
collar, I
is
kind of
laughing.
remember.
Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I think Ellen gave her a flea collar, or that's what that. I was,
No, I didn't give her a flea collar. She was awarded one at the AGM. I did not do that. Look, it was in my house that she got flea bitten with from my cats, my
Yeah.
flea infested cats. I felt pretty bad about that because they don't bother me. But
Yeah.
they really ate her up. Bless her heart.
Yeah. Oh dear. And I had another one on police. I guess not quite police, but
Oh, go for it. The
going
floor
across-
is yours.
going across the border. I remember every time we found out that if when we were crossing the border into Canada, when they asked us what we were doing, we could always get through faster if we had a tape of bell ringing going. And we would get going about telling them how exciting bell ringing was, and they would always wave us through, like, get out of here. Yeah, it worked every time.
That works if you're coming into British border control as well.
Yeah.
You just bore them to death. They just gonna get rid of you.
A slightly tangential to ringing, it was an AGM event up in Philadelphia, and Paul Timmel was staying with one of the local ringers who had cats, and one of the cats decided it licked Paul's beard. And this cat knew how to open doors. So even though Paul would shut the door at night, the cat would jump up and catch at the doorknob until he got the door open. Then he'd come in and start playing with Paul's beard. Paul would throw the cat out, shut the door, and half an hour later, the cat has managed to get back in and is just having the time of his life with Paul's beard. Paul did not get a lot of sleep at that AGM.
Oh dear.
Oh, we have several interruption stories, not only from England but also Philadelphia.
Scotland.
But one involved Eddie Martin, since we talked about him. God bless his soul. Don Trump had organized a Peel tour of Scotland, and Eileen and I were on it. And Eddie was over there for some reason, and Don had asked him to come to one of the Edinburgh Towers and conduct this Peel, and it was going to be Kent Treble Bob Royal. Well, we didn't get very far with Kent Treble Bob Royal, which is typical of some of the Trump ambitious peels that he would go for. So we had to water it down, and it became Plain Bob Royal. Anyway, we got off to Plain Bob Royal. Eddie was conducting, as I said, and it was all going really, really nicely. It was some good ringing, and all of a sudden, there's this loud banging on the door, and Don says to Eddie, "Ignore it. Let's keep going. We have permission." And so we kept going. Well, the banging got louder and louder. So finally, one of us said, "Well, I really think we need to find out what's going on here. It's not our bells, and even though we have permission, we should probably call the peal. So we called it off, opened the door, and it was the secretary who then came out with the statement, "Oh, I just wanted to know when you were going to be finished because we're getting a few complaints from across the street." And it turned out that the person who'd said they were going to clear it all with the authorities never did. So we never really had permission anyway to begin with. But
Yeah.
So that was very, very frustrating. That whole peel tour was very, very frustrating.
we got 1 out of 7,
12.
I think it was. Yeah.
It was one out of
Oh,
12.
Well, we were only involved
We
in
weren't,
7.
yeah, we were involved in 7, but they didn't get many.
Yeah.
We had a similar interruption at Princess Anne for the dedication peel, but Richard Parsons was positioned on the door folds down and the treble stands on the platform formed by the closed door. So we knew that they were not going to be getting into that ringing room anytime soon. But yeah, for about a course, it was 7 extents of Bob Minor, and I think for about most of either the 5th or the 6th course, they were pounding and pounding and pounding, and we just ignored the hell out of them, and they finally went away. We never did find out who was doing it, but that was a dedication peel, and we did have permission for that.
Yeah. And of course, there's been numerous occasions when we've had, not Eileen and I particularly, but others on the tour or in our tower, various wardrobe malfunctions.
Yeah.
Like skirts being lifted high or shorts falling to the ground.
Yeah.
Now, Bruce, there's a kid in the room. So let's make sure we keep this appropriate.
Who are
for the
you kidding?
youngsters. Yeah. We there was just mention, Alan, as you walked away, of a dedication peel that almost went awry, and I think you've got another dedication peel story.
You're muted, Alan. There you go.
Might be the same one.
No, you weren't in Princess Anne.
Oh, sorry. I did miss a little bit of that. Sorry. I hadn't seen my wife in a while. So anyway, this was the dedication peel in Texarkana, which I can't remember if we did it in 81 or 82, but that's what we did. And we brought a band of ringers from Houston that included Mari Cross. And we set out to ring, I'm guessing, Plain Bob Major. And we started out, and there was something wrong with the tube. It just dropped like a rock. And Texarkana, of course, are about the same weight as Philadelphia. Very light bells, should not be hard. So we didn't go up and look. Two of the members dropped out of the band. That was actually Gail Graves and Miss Cross. And we went ahead and got a peel. Plain Bob Minor, I believe it was Plain Bob Minor. And when we went up there to inspect it, we found the camera bag hanging over the stay. Would anybody care to guess who the camera bag belonged to?
Mari Cross?
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't Miss Cross. I'll give you a hint. It was a former Clapper editor.
Uh-oh.
David Graves.
That would be David Graves.
Oh, boy, and he didn't realize it.
No, and if we'd gone up and had a look, we would have found it immediately, but it was just one of those things.
Yeah.
It's good to check the bells before you ring a peal.
Yeah. We've had several interesting instances of bell malfunctions as well over the years, with clappers falling out. Chris was ringing, and all of a sudden, Chris Hallen, this is, there was this loud bang on the floor above, and Helen shrieked and shrunk in the corner, thinking that this thunderbolt was going to come through and hit Chris on his head. Of course, it turned out to be just a clapper falling out and making this horrendous noise on the floor.
You went through one layer of wood.
And
I thought I was losing a husband.
I never forget that.
I was
Yeah,
more
well-
terrified at that moment than I think I've ever been in my life.
Crumbled.
and then
Yeah, well,
I didn't ring. I wasn't a ringer at the time, and I just had no idea what was happening. Jumped away, and the rope started flailing. It was wild.
there was another instance when we rang in Taunton. The bells have been out of
Oh.
action for quite some time, and we went there for the first practice. It was part of the tour, and unfortunately Eileen broke a stay on the number 2, I think it was.
4.
Teresa remembers.
I've read this one recently, so I remember exactly which one it was.
So we rang a couple of the other bells down so people could go and check. And then at the end of the evening, Teresa took the treble to ring down. It wasn't actually the treble.
It was the
treble.
5, the
Yeah.
5 of the back 8.
Whatever.
The number 5 bell, it was the treble of the back 8.
Yeah. So she says, look to, treble's going, she's down. Because we'd all forgotten, everybody had forgotten we'd rung it down.
And Bruce was on the next bell, and he actually pulled off the lower.
That was not one of our highlights.
Well, it was towards the end of practice that it broke. So that's why
Right.
we really didn't do much ringing afterwards. And we came down and everyone came down and they decided that, it's late enough. Let's just lower the bells and call it a night.
And
Yes,
then-
I remember that one.
I bring up the single funniest moment that happened on the Butler tour that really is very ringing related. It was a ground floor ring in the back of the church with a great big stone font with a great big flower arrangement.
Oh,
You know one.
Font. Tall flowers, great big arrangement. And this was, I think, 2006, 50 years ago. And Winston Moody it was the only tour he went on. And he somehow lassoed a tall onion flower with his rope and demarcated it ever so neatly. The rest of the arrangement was unharmed. But that one flower was lassoed and decapitated.
Right, that was a funny story. That was a funny sight.
Flew across the room.
Yeah.
Dear.
So we've got a little bit of time left. So if you've got one that's on your mind, that you go ahead and send me a message. I want to make sure we get everyone in who had something on their mind. And I might just take the speaker's prerogative and tell my wardrobe malfunction story.
Let's hear.
This one comes from when I was taking a group of Kent kids over to England, and Tom Holcomb was chaperoning that trip along with me. And it's important that you know that I sleep very well on planes. But Tom took the first shift sleeping, and I sort of stayed up as we got on the plane and headed out over the ocean. And the kids discovered that the in-flight entertainment systems weren't working back where we were. And they asked the stewardesses a couple of times if they could figure out what was going on. And they couldn't. And the flight attendants took pity on these teenagers who had, another 8 hours in front of them on this plane or whatever it was. And they allowed us to move forward to business class where there were plenty of empty seats, and it was working. So the kids and I were sitting up there for a while. I was on the right side of the plane, they were on the left. And eventually they sort of were being obnoxious teenagers enough that they were asked to move back to coach again. So about halfway through the flight, they're back there, and some meal service starts to come around. And because some of them are under 14, there were 13 and under kids with us, they needed, the cabin attendants needed to check with their responsible adults, things like meal plans and who was eating what and who had what allergies and all of that. And so they said, sure, you know, our chaperone is actually up there. He's wearing a pair of khakis and a blue polo that says Kent School. Now at this point, I'm out cold and I'm wearing gym shorts and a long sleeve t-shirt that I've changed into. So the cabin attendants are looking around for, they don't find me. They wake up Tom, who the kids identify as another adult who's with them. And Tom doesn't know these kids from a hole in the wall because he's retired 3 years at this point. But he gets that straightened out. And another hour later, something comes up, and they say, okay, you know, our teacher is up there. He's wearing a pair of khakis and a blue polo shirt. They look around, they can't find me. They have to go wake Tom up again. Third time, they go wake Tom up. And finally, you know, Tom just storms past the stewardess, as you can imagine, coming up here into business class where I'm out cold, perfectly comfortable. And grabs me and grabs the cabin attendant and says, "That's the guy you want to talk to." And by the time I was back there, he was asleep in his seat again. We have at least a couple more that people wanted to chime in with. So Alan, early AGM, what sorts of things transpired? Well, almost 40 years ago, probably we're talking, right?
Yes, this was at the first AGM in Houston. Can't remember what year that was. I'm too old, but you know, maybe somebody can look it up and tell me what year it was. We had this particular parish, St. Thomas's, had a rectory, and they had an assistant pastor, or had a house for an assistant pastor, and it was on Grape Street. So it was called the Grapery. And so at the time when we had the AGM, the Grapery was just vacant. And I should mention, devoid of just about everything. But we had a bunch of young people. I would guess that all or almost all of them were from Kalamazoo, or had gone to Kalamazoo. And actually may have still been going to Kalamazoo. And they were just staying in a house, you know, on like sleeping bags and such, and there just wasn't much in there. Anyway, there was apparently one incident that had to do with someone walking in on somebody else. And of course, one of the things that was missing out of the Grapery were the shower curtains. So yes, a couple people got a little better acquainted than they expected. And I don't know, should I tell their names? None of them, the ones that I know about were here. I don't think there's anybody here that was at that AGM. Tom for some reason missed it. I don't know why.
I'll appeal to members of the executive board to make that decision. I'm going to wash my hands of that one, Alan.
Anyway, it was perfectly innocent, but it was just a surprise, and it just was something else that happened.
Let's see, Linda, before you bring us home, Tom, is there anything that people need to know? Any program notes, anything before tomorrow morning?
Oh, not that I know of. It's all on the schedule. So I would just refer to that probably.
Refer to the schedule. All right, Linda.
The official meeting at 11 or at 3 o'clock Eastern time, right? So.
Yeah, exactly right. Pub quiz tomorrow night at 6 Eastern time.
Okay, Linda Rankin, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, Ellen talking about Kalamazoo kind of segs nicely into this. When Kalamazoo had an AGM, I think it was back in the early 90s or something like that, we were ringing appeal, and Jeff Del Papa came in with the camera, and he wanted to take a picture of the us as we were ringing. And I must have been ringing the 2 or the 3 bell, I can't remember, but I had a good view of everything. So Jeff, you know how you've got 2 sets of stairs going over. Well, Jeff was at the top of the stairs, and he was there with the camera leaning over, and he didn't realize that his lens cap was loose, and the lens cap fell and bopped right off Ken Ballew's head. And Ken didn't miss a beat, but Eddie Futcher, who was conducting, was rather bothered and let Jeff know about it. So yeah, that's been on my mind since Ken passed away this summer.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's sort of a fitting place to end it. We've had a lot of good times, and thank you all for sharing those good times. And we've learned so much from those ringers who came before us and donated so much of their time to us. And thank you to Beverly, Linda, Eileen, Bruce, Teresa, Helen, Chris, Alan, Tom, Rick, Miriam. I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone, but all of you for sharing those stories. And let's go out and make some new ones this year.
Yeah, hopefully.
Thank you all.